Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we've got another spine-chilling horror story that's going to crawl right under your skin. So turn off the lights, get comfy, grab your popcorn, or maybe even a blanket, because we're diving deep into a haunting tale of ancient rituals, eerie reflections, and the terrifying legacy of one forgotten family. This is the Hollow Ones. The wind that swept across Greystone Valley always came just after dusk, sharp, biting, and mournful. It whispered through the decaying trees like a forgotten hymn, brushing bare skin with a chill that felt less like weather and more like warning. The valley, once a fertile span of farmland and thriving countryside, had become a silent scar on the map. Time had stopped in Greystone, or at least, no one was brave enough to notice when it kept moving. At the center of this forgotten place stood the Brer Estate, a sprawling Victorian manor perched precariously on a hill at the edge of Black Hollow Forest. The trees behind it seemed darker than they should, and the air hung heavy with an unspoken history. No one lived there now. No one but the wind, the woods, and what remained of the Brer family's secrets. It began with Samuel Brer. Samuel, in his early 40s, was a man built on principles, an academic, a father, and a man who believed knowledge could shine light on any darkness. He taught literature at Blackmere College, a small liberal arts school in the neighboring town. When his great-aunt Helena passed, she left him the estate, land, house, and all that came with it. The inheritance was generous, and after a year of financial strain and mounting tension in Boston, Samuel saw the estate as a retreat. A fresh start. He moved there with his wife Eleanor, and their daughter, Lily. Eleanor was a painter, quiet and deeply emotional, with a habit of seeing patterns and stories in everything from clouds to spilled coffee. She welcomed the estate's melancholic grandeur as inspiration. Lily, at 17, was less impressed. She was sharp, emotionally intuitive, and uneasy from the moment they drove past the crooked iron gates. The house was massive. Wooden floors creaked with memories. Dust clung to curtains like whispers. The wallpaper peeled like shedding skin. Yet Eleanor loved it instantly. She set up a studio in the sunroom, with wide windows that looked out toward the tree line. But Lily couldn't shake the feeling that the house was waiting. She began to dream on their first night. Vivid, surreal dreams. She'd be barefoot in the woods, moonlight filtering through dead branches, something crunching behind her, always out of view. And always, a man watching from a distance. Tall, still, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. In the dream, she couldn't see his eyes. But she knew he was staring. She told her mother, who said it was just the mind adjusting. Samuel told her to write it down. Sometimes the best stories come from the most unsettling dreams, he said. The days passed slowly. Samuel buried himself in the dusty study. Eleanor painted more feverishly than she had in years. Lily kept to herself, walking the halls with a growing sense of unease. The house seemed to breathe, as if inhaling her every step. The first incident was small. Eleanor left her brushes out overnight. When she returned in the morning, they had been cleaned. Not only clean, but neatly aligned, by size. Samuel swore he hadn't touched them. Lily never entered the studio. Eleanor laughed it off. But that night, she dreamed of faceless people standing in her studio, watching her sleep. The next day, Samuel found a letter behind a loose brick in the fireplace. A letter dated 1871, written in ink that had faded to rust. It was from Elias Brer, the original builder of the house, and his ancestor. The letter spoke of gatherings beneath the earth, and mirrors that do not reflect, but reveal. Samuel, ever the scholar, became obsessed. He started digging through local archives. What he found was disturbing. Elias Brer had been a preacher. A visionary, or a madman, depending on the article. He believed Greystone was a spiritual veil, a thin place between this world and another. He'd formed a secret congregation known as the Hollow Ones. Rumors swirled of masked rituals, mirror sacrifices, and unholy chants during blood moons. The last known sighting of Elias was a foggy December night, after which he and several of his followers vanished. Meanwhile, Lily's dreams worsened. She now saw the man with the hat inside the house. At her doorway. In her mirror. In the reflection of her spoon at breakfast. When she blinked, he was gone. But her gut said otherwise. Scratches began to appear on her bedroom window. Her room was on the 3rd floor. One night, she forced herself to look, and she saw him. Standing at the edge of the woods, his hat bowed. Just watching. She screamed. But by the time her father reached her room, there was nothing outside. Eleanor started painting figures she couldn't explain. Faceless women. Shadowed forests. One painting showed Lily asleep in bed, a tall dark figure watching her from the footboard. When Samuel asked what it was, she said, "I didn't paint that one consciously." By the 2nd month, the house had changed. Doors opened by themselves. Footsteps echoed when no one moved. Mirrors began to fog without heat. The old phonograph played music that hadn't been recorded. The air smelled of ash and metal. One day, Lily was exploring the basement when she found a door behind an old cabinet. It was steel. Cold. And locked with 4 chains. When she told her parents, Samuel turned pale. That door wasn't in the house blueprints. Over the next week, the chains began to fall off. 1 per day. On the 5th day, the door stood open. Inside was a spiral staircase made of stone, descending into the dark. They should have left. But curiosity, and perhaps something deeper, pulled them down. At the bottom, they found a massive underground chamber, circular in shape, lined with carved masks, dozens of them, made of ash wood and covered in red paint. At the center stood a pedestal. And on it, a journal. Elias Brayer's journal. The pages were filled with a spiraling script. Samuel, fluent in Latin and several ancient dialects, deciphered them. Elias had performed a ritual with mirrors, a way to summon something he called the reflection beneath. He believed mirrors didn't just reflect light, they reflected souls. And through them, you could pull something else through. Something ancient, Samuel whispered, older than death. Something that once formed. After that, Eleanor changed. She painted constantly, barely speaking. Her eyes seemed distant, as if she were hearing a song no one else could. One morning, she was gone. Her easel remained. On it, a portrait of Lily, her eyes entirely black. Samuel locked himself in the study. He stopped eating. Pages and pages of translations, symbols, rituals, all littered the floor. Lily tried to speak to him, but he'd just mutter about shadows that didn't follow, reflections that blinked when you didn't, and voices from the walls. Lily was alone. She began to hear whispers at night. Always from mirrors. When she covered them, she'd hear knocking. When she uncovered them, she saw herself smiling when she wasn't. Her reflection would tilt its head, then lag behind. Sometimes it would mouth words she didn't say. She started recording herself as she slept. The footage showed her rising, staring into the mirror, and speaking in a guttural language. One night, she reached into the mirror, and the glass rippled. The night of the blood moon, she returned to the chamber. The pedestal was gone. In its place, a full-length mirror. 7 feet tall. The frame was carved with symbols. In the glass, she saw herself. But her reflection smiled first. She reached out. Her reflection reached back. And they touched. The townspeople say the fire began around midnight. A red glow lit the sky. By morning, the house was ashes. No bodies were found. Only the mirror. Untouched by flame. Standing alone in the ruins. Now, hikers avoid Greystone. The wind carries voices. And on certain nights, when the fog rolls in just right, you might see a girl at the forest's edge. Barefoot. Whispering. And if she sees you, she smiles. If you made it this far, congratulations, you survived the tale of the Hollow Ones. But don't get too comfortable. Tell me in the comments, what do you think really came through that mirror? Was Lily the same after? Or was something else wearing her skin? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for more horror stories like this.